Kia ora koutou, and welcome to Ōtautahi City Voices, where we listen to Ōtautahi during the COVID-19 pandemic by interviewing city makers and community leaders. We're interested in hearing from a diversity of voices about what people have discovered while we were under lockdown and how it either influenced or galvanised their vision for Ōtautahi Christchurch. I'm Jessica Halliday, and I'm the director of Te Pūtahi, Centre for Architecture and City Making. Today I'm talking with James Lunday, an urban designer who lives in Christchurch but works all over Australasia. Kia ora, Jim.
Kia ora, Jessica.
Welcome, and thank you for being part of Ōtautahi City Voices.
It's a pleasure.
Can you please start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your passion is?
I'll try and keep it very short. My passion is actually people and communities and economic regeneration, but I manifest that as a designer, originally an architect, and then a planner architect, and then an urban designer. So I see my contribution is to community, to the environment, and to the ability to make a good living is how I see how I operate. I come from Glasgow originally, but I have worked all over the world. But regardless of still a hint of the accent, I've lived in New Zealand for 30 years now.
Great. And what part of Ōtautahi were you in lockdown in?
I'm in Oxford Terrace, right on the river, the corner of Oxford and Kilmore. So very central.
So what did you discover or learn about our city or about that community during lockdown?
Well, I've been sleeping so much better because of the lack of traffic noise. I've been enjoying my walks in the peace and quiet, and I've enjoyed seeing families out together during the day in the sunshine, the little toddlers on their bikes, other people on other bikes. I've enjoyed seeing people's wonderment at the city and the parks and the landscape.
So did that surprise you, or did something else surprise you about that time?
I think, no, that didn't surprise me. What surprised me was, since then, and talking to people and obviously getting used to the new technology like we're using now, talking on Zoom, was how people were enjoying the lockdown and what they enjoyed about it. And even although some of it was scary, it didn't overpower the fear. The enjoyment of being in a family, in a community, using the local neighbourhood, not having cars around, having more nature. It was kind of reaffirmed my beliefs of an urban designer of the sort of city that we should have.
Wow, that's really interesting that you heard from people how much they enjoyed that experience of lockdown. So given that, does that provide you with certain post-lockdown fears, or what are you most worried about now we're allowed a little bit more freedom?
I'll give you a statistic. We dropped our CO2 emissions. We had the highest level of drop in CO2 emissions in the world in our lockdown. Our CO2 emissions were down 42%. I think it was 42 or 41%. We have no industry really. We have no big power stations. So that was down to cars. My biggest fear is that we go back slowly to business as usual, when it was so obvious business as usual wasn't working for the majority of people, majority of families, majority of communities, or the environment. And my biggest fear is we don't seize this opportunity to get rid of the neoliberal approach to the world and have one that's much more focused on well-being, mental health, stability, and a secure environment for our future generations and ourselves.
So do you think that the experience led you to a new hope or dream for Ōtautahi Christchurch, or did it simply galvanise the one you already had?
Oh, no, it galvanized my professional opinion of what makes city work. But it did allow me to dream that it could happen in my lifetime. And I have to admit, I had almost given up that dream, because regardless of what governments came in power, we were still controlled by big business and their needs rather than the environment's needs and the people's needs. And so a glimpse of hope of the dream being delivered has been presented by our leaders, our political leaders at the moment, as long as we support them in that journey.
So I'm just wondering if there's a little bit of tension here, because sometimes the way you mentioned employment when you were talking about your passions,
Yeah.
and yet we often sort of simplify what employment is and what it looks like by looking to some of our biggest employers, which you've also just castigated as, the powers of capitalism. So there's a little bit of tension going on in between, I mean, like if you simplified it, between your passion and your fears, isn't there?
Yeah, but I would separate that. There's different actors on the stage. Most of the employers, and for nearly 20 years I ran my own company and employed 20 people. I was an employer. There's the employers, but most employers are controlled by the financial organizations. Most of the workers are controlled by the financial organizations. Our local authorities and local governments have been controlled by the financial organizations. And yet the financial organizations only exist because of us. They don't exist in themselves. We print the money, not them. The banks don't print money. We print the money and give it to them so they can lend it to us. So I could like to see a break in that chain where we have gainful employment and have sufficient and not excess to live a healthy life with our neighbours.
And so how do you see that rolling out in Ōtautahi Christchurch specifically? Because do you think it's a little, when you think about the post-COVID, or rather the lockdown, post-lockdown recovery, a place, that future here might look quite different to how it might look in Queenstown or Wellington.
Yeah, it could look very different. We need an invigorated leadership in Ōtautahi if we are going to change things. We need the next generation to step up and actually take some level of control rather than stand on the sidelines. It's all very well to be kind and gentle and appeasing, but at some point you have to stand up for your beliefs. And I think that if we don't do that, we will slide into business as usual. And we need some really bold decisions to be made about how we manage our public spaces, how we manage our private spaces that are left unfertile and vacant. And the biggest, boldest thing is we need to reinvigorate our neighbourhoods and create the conditions that allows us to abandon the car. And to do that means investing. And yet we have a leadership who is already talking about austerity measures in the city. When in fact, at this point in time, I'm a post-war baby, not a post-boom baby. At this time, we need investment. What we saw with the GFC was the countries that went into austerity have never lifted out of austerity. And the countries that spent have advanced because money doesn't really exist. It's a fiction. It's not even underpinned by gold anymore. It's a fantasy. And so I like the fairy tale of it. So let's just print more of it and get on with recreating our society.
It's a little bit complicated when it comes to local leadership and local government, isn't it? With that, I understand Christchurch has, compared to other OECD countries where local government will often spend around 30% of the total public purse. In New Zealand, local government spends around 11% of the total public purse. And of course, they have far more constraints. They can't print money, unlike central government, who can print money. And it's wonderful to hear your call for an invigorated leadership for possibly for younger people to step up. But there's lots of complications and barriers locally, aren't there?
Yeah, but there always is, you know, and we just need to dismantle the barriers in a productive and creative way. It's not easy, and you're right that local authorities they can't do it on their own. And I'm not actually directly criticising the current leadership; it's more the system, and we need to reinvent the system. We have too much government. And I don't want to sound like the new right now. When I say too much government, we have too many layers for a small country. You know, we have ECAN, we have the council, we have Aotearoa, we have MIMBI. We've got so many organisations all doing the same thing down here, all involved in the same area. There might be a way to streamline it. We have a system where the council has to have businesses to make money to supplement rates because they have no other way of raising money other than rates. And let's face it, the rates are expensive. If you're on a fixed income, which everybody's on a fixed income. I don't know why people say a fixed income. We are all on fixed incomes. You have your tax taken out of it, and our hugely expensive rents or mortgages that we have actually burdened ourselves with as a nation. There is very little left, and the rates are a significant proportion. So there is very little room for the council to manoeuvre in, and I understand that. So it's not a direct criticism of them. It's a criticism that we haven't got a system where certain things are funded through different ways, through government borrowing, through government grants, like other countries have. And the rates are really only for the basic services. We shouldn't be providing infrastructure through ratepayers, for instance. And so there needs to be a change, but that change comes from leadership demanding change and breaking down the empires they've become accustomed to and creating new systems.
So, Jim, this has been a fantastic conversation, and it feels like it's just the start of a conversation. So I'd like to thank you so much for giving me and anyone listening a huge amount of food for thought. Thank you so much. How do people find or connect with you online?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and so if they want to contact me, they'll find me on LinkedIn. I keep that very much as a professional forum. Well, professional is not really the word. It's not a personal vehicle for me. So it's the perfect one to discuss and talk about that. And people that do link with me there will find a lot of other people who don't all have the same opinion as me, but debating rather than criticizing and discussing, because none of us have the answer, but collectively we've the ability to find the answer to change the society we've built. And I think that, yeah, so I would encourage people to join the discussion.
Great, thank you. And thanks to those of you who've been watching or listening. Please send us your feedback, share your views or vision for Ōtautahi Now. We'd love to hear from you. So it's goodbye from Jim.
Goodbye from Jessica.
And goodbye from me. Ka
Goodbye.
kite anō.